Autism sprinter. Think equity. Yeah. It's time to give the power back to the people. We're fighting to make our beliefs equal. Look at the failed policies and how they treat you. We got strength, yeah, we're far from feeble. This is for anyone with autism or a disability. Time to unite, show them how strong our will can be. Move readily, we're promoting equity. A non-profit platform, that's the recipe. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with autism sprinters. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with autism sprinter. It's time to make a change. It's time to stand up for what we believe in. Equality and equity across the board. No matter your race, nation, or creed, disability, or your needs. Yes, it gotta be equal. It gotta be right.
Hey guys, how are you? Good morning. Welcome to another show on the Stabilize Me series with Autism Sprinter. Today, I am super excited because this is someone I've been following for some time, and her passion, her passion is so real, and understanding that we have to have a bigger discussion about safety and what does that look like for those with disabilities, because we all know, right, that we're still playing catch up in the space of policy, especially for a very marginalized group of individuals with disabilities. And so there's a few things that she has going on, that she's pushing legislation on a topic. I don't even want to talk about it because I'd rather her kind of, talk about the piece of legislation that she is working on, and that she's very passionate about. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Carrie of A Safe for Me.
Thanks, Yahara. Thanks for having me. Thank you to Autism Sprinter and all the fantastic work that you do, and giving me this platform, like you said, to talk about something that I feel so passionate about, but sometimes may be boring to people or they don't really know what it means. So like you said, right now, I'm here today to actually talk about a little bit of legislation that I've been working on. And I'm excited to get right into it. So I do have a PowerPoint. I'm having just some technical issues bringing it. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So part of the Stabilize Me series, super excited to be part of Yahara's amazing work here through Autism Sprinter and the work that I'm doing through A Safe for Me. So today we're going to talk about effective communication with first responders and getting to safety. The technical part now, talking about House Bill 4080, an act relative to more accessible 911 disability indicator forms. I'm Carrie Noseworthy, founder of A Safe for Me. Okay, so brief disclaimer here. So this presentation is meant to go over the House Bill 4080 and why communication prior to an emergency is such an important determinant of outcomes. We live this life, don't we? And/or we turn on the news, we see it, we hear it in our communities, and there's no one way to get to safety and better. So it's going to take each of us doing our small part. This discussion is not legal advice and should only be used to complement your family's toolkit. Your family member, yourself, your providers are the experts, and I'm in no way at any point telling you to call 911 or not call 911. I'm going to talk about some things you can do in advance to lessen the likelihood you do have to call them, or to help improve outcomes if you do need the first responders to show up. So information to the specific wording of this bill, House Bill 4080, and the actual 911 disability indicator form can actually be found under the discussion part of the Facebook invitation from Autism Sprinter. So just a moment to be in the moment. We are all stressed out. We are all exhausted. We are all doing 6 times the amount of work with our families, with ourselves, in our professional lives, with our kids, with advocacy. So before we delve into such an important topic, just wanted to put up a very positive looking picture, take it in the moment, and let you know that I care about you. I care about your family, your outcomes, the work you're doing in your communities. Sometimes it can feel like we're in this alone, but we're all in this together. Okay, so we're going to delve right in. So a little bit about my background and my lived experience. I have lived experience as a sibling addressing and dealing with mental health, with addiction, with recovery, with the juvenile justice system, with the adult system. I have lived experience as a parent advocating for 2 children who have special needs through the public schools. And now I have experience as a parent of my oldest son who has long hauler symptoms through COVID, and helping him navigate healthcare, employment, all of those things. So I use that lived experience in combination with my formal education to get out there and do the best I can to improve outcomes in communities, in my own community, and communities throughout the Commonwealth, and beyond that if I can. One of the things I learned is that safety seems sometimes like a boring word. We don't know what it means. We all bring different things to the table. All the stakeholders have different mission statements, right? Public schools, healthcare, DCF, juvenile justice, adult justice. We all bring different mission statements and different ideas about what safety looks like. So I created a new definition. And my definition is safety should look at the whole person with all of their intersections within the context of an ever-changing environment. And I push that wherever I go because I really want all of us to be working towards the same thing, towards the same outcomes. We all want everyone to be safe, or safe as they can in difficult situations. You can't predict every situation. You can't make every outcome that you want to happen, but we can prepare, we can learn how to pivot, we can work with our stakeholders, and we can do better for next time. And here's another big one. So we see this on the news all the time. You know, it's us against them. It's the police versus the communities. It's the teachers versus the parents. And we really need to get away from that. So one of the things I want to talk about with this proposed legislation is that when community members can more equitably access safety and have improved outcomes, we also better support the safety of the first responders that arrive on scene when someone calls 911. We all want our loved ones and ourselves to get through the day alive, right? We can all agree on that because everything stems from that. So whether you're a community member, whether you're an individual with a disability or mental health or some other sort of barrier to accessing safety, whether you're a first responder or your loved one's a first responder, we all want to get through the day safely. That's something we all want. And when a first responder gets to a scene and has appropriate information, when we're working together with our first responders and outcomes are improved, that improves outcomes for the individual, their family, their community, the first responders on scene, and the families of those first responders. So this really helps the entire community. So a little brief history here. 911 was actually created in 1967 by the President's Commission for Law Enforcement and the Administration of Justice to cover all emergencies in about 93% of Canada, as well as the United States. 10 years prior to that, the National Association of Fire Chiefs worked on ways to centralize the reporting of fires. So that's actually where 911 came from. And it was created at a time when we all had landlines, right? Cell phones didn't exist. Then they created 911, which is actually super complex in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The way that it works is unless you are, I think it's in Boston or the islands, you know, you're calling on your cell phone typically now, less people have landlines. And then that goes to a center, and then that center dispatches to state police. And so it's kind of a complicated system. And for a long time, the only people that could access 911 disability indicator forms with their first responders had to have a landline. That's not really equitable access, right? Because the majority of us have cell phones. And again, whether we live this or we turn on the news, we see that safety concerns are everywhere. And what can we do to actually make a change toward making things better? Information for our first responders. So I went to my state representative, Natalie Higgins, and I asked her, hey, can we take this disability form that exists for landlines and expand it to cell phone users and really work hard to make it equitably accessible to all community members. So on February 17th, 2021, she filed the legislation, an act to expand access to 911 disability indicator forms. Fast forward through the work that we've been doing, and in December of 2021, because 911 recognized this was such an issue and public was pushing for it, and they were pushing for it, they were able to expand access of the disability indicator form, which again can be found under the discussion portion of the invitation. And they made it accessible to cell phone users and what's called VoIP users, which that just means a telephone, a computer, or an electronic device that does the same thing. It sends the information over the internet or other technology. This is an exciting step forward, but we're not done yet. And we really got to codify, which just means make sure this bill gets turned into a law. This bill, because the form itself isn't the best form. It's very clinical. When you look at it, of course, it's better than nothing. It's minimal information, and I really want to make sure that we have a form that does what we say it's going to do. In that split second, in those split moments before the first responders arrive on scene, what information might they have to actually improve outcomes? Now, of course, separate from the work I'm doing, we need training, we need to address systemic racism, we need to address internal bias, all of these things, but we need to do all of it. We can't just do one part of it because we're never going to get to safety. Okay, so why do we call 911? We can all agree it's never for anything positive, right? You don't call 911 for a positive reason. Sometimes the concerns are known and sometimes they're new concerns. You could have someone breaking into your house, or you could be dealing with a loved one or a neighbor or a relative, someone who has known mental health concerns, maybe concerns through disability. They're going through a lot. You can't get them what they need and things are starting to escalate. An imminent threat, known or unknown, right? To report a crime. Let's talk a little bit about the outcomes as community members now versus a little bit back in the day. So I'm a child of the 80s. Back in the day, you might actually call the police and ask them to show up to your house and have them talk to your child about respect, about listening to you, about the rules of the household, about the expectations. Please, 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 after working in the courts and after working in juvenile justice diversion, those days are gone. 911 is a call to first responders who are very busy, a call to action. It's a call to ask them to do something, and that something is not to have a conversation with your loved one, a neighbor, a family member, an individual to help them sort of get to where they need to be. That they just simply, they're too busy. They don't have time for that. So one of the things I talked about to families about is those days are past. Please know if you call 911, the first responders are expecting action. What is it that you want from them? If you call 911, the police are coming. If your kid accidentally calls 911, the police are coming, okay? They do this because if someone feels unsafe or in danger and tries to call 911 and then are told, tell them it's nothing, tell them it's nothing, it's really sort of to protect the community. So the police are going to show up. And in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if you call 911 and let them know someone has put hands on someone, there will be an arrest. This has nothing to do with police training. This has nothing to do whether the police are going to come and be nice and listen to your story. This has to do with domestic violence. So in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, sometimes people are too afraid to press charges or the police show up and there was nothing to be done. So now when someone puts hands on, and this also includes a child, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you can be arrested as young as age 12. As little as a few years ago, you could be arrested as young as age 7. Yes, even in Massachusetts. So it used to be 7. Now you can be arrested at age 12. If you call the police and you say someone has put hands on, there will be an arrest. And oftentimes that is an arrest of the child if a child is involved, because if they arrest the parent, then and there's no one else to help with the kids, then they've got to call DCF, then they've got to figure everything out, make sure that everyone's safe. So please know these things are going to happen if you call. Why else do we call? Frustration, desperation, systems failures, and inaction, right? To the point of the next bullet point. We all know the number. We all know 911. We may not know how to navigate systems. We may be frustrated with the schools. We may not be getting the answers we want out of specific systems that are supposed to be helping us. What do? We call 911. An example of this is a CRA, which used to be called SHINS when I was younger. We set this up, and I'm just here to say there is no silver bullet in mental health. There's no silver bullet in disability. There's no silver bullet in education or safety. So please, 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 even though the systems are overwhelmed with COVID and everything that we have going on right now, and as stressful as it all is, there is no silver bullet to where you're trying to be. I want to talk a minute again about systemic racism, the lack of training. We all know these things exist. We all need to work on, in our individual communities and at the municipal, statewide level, federal level, for things in our systems to help address these issues, things to address training for mental health and disability and intersectionality. But a big one that gets missed, and again, huge shout out to Yara for seeing this in me and the work that I do, is the intersection also of race and disability. Okay, we know that the work needs to be done around systemic racism and individual racism, but people oftentimes don't want to talk about that intersection of race and disability. And this is why it's so important. What can we do? We're all exhausted. We're all doing the work of 10 people. We're chugging through the day. What can we do? Well, you can pick something small that you feel that you can do. And one thing you can do is you can work with your first responders locally. 988 is coming out in July of 2022, and that is supposed to address calls around mental health, suicide, things like that. But again, let's look at that intersectionality of disability and mental health. Not everybody knows or understands those nuances, and they may or may not click it over to 988 and not 911. It's actually going to be the operator that makes that decision. So in all of this, we need to make sure the rollout of this bill, we need to make sure that whoever's training the operators have some form of either lived experience or taking information from people who have lived experience, right? That means us as the individuals who are going through this, or as parents, caregivers, aunts, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers, right? We need to help inform the training that these operators will receive because someone's life could depend on it. Why is parity so crucial for outcomes? We have 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now, other states who are states do things a lot by county, so there's a lot more collaboration on what's happening and rollouts. Because we are a Commonwealth, we do things separate in each city and town, and that can lead to inequities and difficulty with parity, because you may have a phenomenal city or town with phenomenal police and phenomenal firefighters, EMTs, trained professionals, and then the next town over may not be able to get that training due to funding or resources, whatever it happens to be. And then if you happen to be there and something happens in that community, you or your loved one or someone that you care about may be experiencing something entirely different. Just as a small aside, you can also text 911 in Massachusetts and actually in the state of New York. I think I may have put on a page that I already went through. Yes, I went over something I should have mentioned. 911 actually has a Facebook page, believe it or not. If you want to look them up on Facebook, just type in Massachusetts and then the word state separately, and then 911. So Massachusetts, then state, then 911. I highly encourage you to do this. See what's going on. They have meetings, they have discussions. That's something we can all do, right? That that's something that is accessible. Here's something else that you can do depending upon the situation is you can also call the business line for your police or fire or EMTs if you don't feel like you're in an imminent threat, and you can express and explain your situation. This is a moment to, again, if you see an escalation but you're not an imminent threat, you don't know if you should call 911, you can call them and just say, listen, my son who has autism and anxiety, he's ramping up. I've never seen him like this before, or I have seen him like this before. We're in COVID, he can't access what he needs. Can you just send over some EMTs? I just need to transport him safely to an ER, and I want to do so as safely as we can and try not to have this end up in an arrest. Okay, that's huge. That's something else that you can do now that you understand that you can't. Again, I'm not telling you to do that, not call 911. I'm just giving you another tool in your toolkit to determine, what you want to do to move forward and how you can sort of get at the outcomes that you're looking for. Another thing that I would like to just kind of bring up is, what are these outcomes that we are looking for? Why do we call 911? We're talking about the different reasons why you might pick up the phone and dial 911. But it's also important that we think through, if we have a moment, and this isn't something that comes out of nowhere and there's an imminent threat, you have to call 911. What is it that you are expecting the first responders to do? And if you do have the time to think that through, please do. And if you care for a loved one, whether you're a parent, a caregiver, an aunt, an uncle, a sibling, a whomever, and you know that these things come up often, I'm asking you to sort of take that extra step and to plan for future events so that you have the best possible outcomes for your loved one, for yourself, and honestly for the first responders who arrive on scene. What is it that you're looking for them to do? If you're just so exhausted, you have no respite, the systems are broken, and you don't know what else to do, 911 can result in arrest, and then your loved one is involved in the juvenile justice system. And trust me, it will not minimize your stress. It's going to increase your stress in ways that you have not had before, because then you're going to have court dates. Then you may have legal fees or deal with whoever the court-appointed attorney is. So if you know that your loved one has these concerns, I encourage you to plan forward, even though you say, Carrie, are you kidding me? I'm exhausted. I've got nothing left. I hear you. So chunk it down into small, manageable parts and do whatever that you feel is feasible for your family and for yourself. I'm not here to be another person to ask you to, if you could just. That's a trigger for me as well. What I'm here to do is chunk some things down to make them more manageable, to impart with you some information that you may not know, so that when these things happen, you'll be best informed for more positive outcomes. So, action items prior to an emergency. Think through who is in your loved one's chain of command, right? So if it's a minor child, you have a pediatrician. If it's an adult, hopefully you have a primary caregiver. If you are in between primary caregivers or pediatricians, I hugely encourage you, step one, no matter what. And I know it's very hard to find a primary care doctor right now, especially one that's within, accessible limits of your community. I highly encourage you to make sure that yourself or the individual that you are caring for has a primary care or pediatrician. If you then say, well, what are they going to do, Carrie? I go there for, shots or ear infections. They're supposed to do for children what your primary care does for you, right? So if you're healthy, fantastic. If you are addressing mental health, hopefully they're helping you get the psychological or psychiatric care that you need, or helping you through exercise, or helping you in some way. Or if you had cancer, they're helping you find oncologists. Think of the pediatrician for your child the same way. I mean, it's almost more important. They're transforming into an adult, into a person. And if you're saying, Carrie, the pediatrician doesn't listen to me, I highly encourage you to find one that understands your family values, is culturally competent, gets your kids' needs, because if you don't, it's actually going to make things harder for you in the future. So, who is in your loved one's chain of command? This is a really great time, even though it's hard to get a provider right now. I'm not saying any of this is easy. It is time to make sure that you have someone that's a good fit for your child. Have all your numbers in your phone and have your phone charged. This seems so small, but sometimes people might say, well, I wanted to call mobile crisis, but I didn't have their number, or my phone was dead. When I've worked with families or myself. Simple thing, huge outcomes. Have your phone charged. Make sure everything is in your phone. If you're nervous that your loved one may throw your phone or do something like that, have the important numbers also written down, but have them in a central location so you can access them. If you have more time, and if you're not in crisis, you can always have copies of advanced communication to providers, meaning a safety plan, a list of medications, medical issues. This is when you have a situation where maybe crisis shows up and it's not 911, or you're talking with an EMT while your loved one is going through escalation, and you have a little bit more time to impart some knowledge, like, no, don't give them Ativan. In that situation, Ativan has the opposite response in my child's body. That's really important, right? That's really important so that the situation that's difficult doesn't become more difficult. De-escalation techniques in advance of a crisis, so important. Sensory activities, sensory diet. If you don't, we're all at different points in our journey. So if you don't know what a sensory diet is, all of us can partake in this. What do you do when you chew gum? You relax. You can think more clearly. Tapping your pen, shaking your leg, those are things that we might all do. Using a stress ball, right? And our kids and our loved ones, or our young adults, or even our elderly, what is it that brings them calm? Next thing I'm going to talk about triggers, what not to do. This is one of my ultimate goals for this legislation, is to really revamp that 911 indicator form. Make sure that individuals with lived experience are contributing to the conversation. And if those first responders see nothing else on that form or that screen when that 911 operator is communicating with them, I want them to see what not to do. Not even a diagnosis, not even mental health or autism or neurological or traumatic. What shouldn't they do? Because there's no cure for any of these things per se. What we can do is, again, sensory diets, de-escalation, learning the person's needs, whatever it happens to be. But when a first responder is showing up, maybe they can show up, let them know, can you please show up without lights? Or please show up without sound, right? Those seem small, but if that's the one straw that breaks the camel's back for your loved one, that escalates them to the point of what I call the point of no return, that's going to push things closer to a space of someone may get hurt and or arrested, and trauma lasts forever, okay? So that's why these things that seem so small are actually very, very important. Supports in advance, families, friends, providers. Natural supports. It's tough because some of us have none, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge that. Some of us have none, and we're relying simply on ourselves, but I do still have to talk about supports in advance in case there is someone that maybe you haven't thought of before, or if there is no one, that when you do start working with first responders, or people or clinicians or anyone after the fact, you can make sure that they know, like, I'm intelligent, I'm capable, I know what to do, but I am tired, I need respite, and I need help because I don't have any long-term supports. And it's important that they know that, and you have to say, please connect me with long-term resources that I can access in my community. Because if you can't access them, whether you don't have a vehicle or you have a disability or some other barrier that's in the way, then they might as well not exist. So if people are telling you about things that you can't access, please speak up. It's not rude. It's helpful to both you and them for them to understand what you can and can't access. Just a couple of things that you may or may not know about, depending upon where you are in your journey. Again, action items prior to emergency, or if you've had past emergencies and you're like, I'm exhausted, how can I make these things have better outcomes? Knowing full well, and I always tell everyone in advocacy, whether it's families, educators, legislators, stakeholders, I'm a very root cause person and an honest person. I'm not saying these things were easy to access prior to COVID, nor am I saying they're easier to access now, but I still want to talk about them because it's important to know that they do exist and things to try for. So one is called the MCPAP program. That is a program that my own family benefited from many years ago with UMass, where if your child can't access a pediatric psychiatrist, you can access one once. And I thought, once, what are they going to do? I was like, this is a waste of time. Changed the whole trajectory of my son's life. What they do is meet with the child once and with you, but then they are also an ongoing support to your child's pediatrician. This is huge when there are medication questions involved, other things going on that are beyond the purview of a pediatrician. Interface program, which is community specific, not just for children. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just noticing I'm on the wrong slide. Okay. I have it written down that interface is only for children. That is incorrect. It's actually also for the adults and communities. It is not in all 351 different cities and towns. You can actually just Google interface program mental health Massachusetts, or better said, interface program, and then put your city or town name and see what comes up. They have information in at least Spanish, I believe, as well as English. They have flyers you can print out. This is something accessible through your child's school if your community has it. But again, it's not just for children, it's for adults as well. You're supposed to get a human on the other side of the phone, and you can tell them what it is that you're dealing with and ask for help navigating and accessing professionals. And then there's supposed to also be a follow-up. There's also, I believe, some emergency situations that you can, there are numbers and things there. If your community has it, fantastic. If your community doesn't, advocate for it through an email, through a phone call, send the information. I know I live in Leominster, so we do have it here. Here it's actually paid for through the Leominster Public Schools, but it is accessible to all adults and children in the city of Leominster. Applying, this is again a longer term thing for DDS, which is the Department of Developmental Services, or DMH, the Department of Mental Health. There's not enough time with so little left here to go in, and I understand the chasm when you have both mental health and disability concerns, which I also continue to advocate for both professionally and personally. But accessing these services is also different in each section of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So they all run a little bit differently. You should get a caseworker, that part shouldn't be different. But some sections of the Commonwealth might have money for respite, some might just have resources. So it's important that you find out if your loved one can apply for DDS or DMH. These can be complicated, they take advocacy. It's sort of like navigating the special education a little bit, but a little bit better. But trying to get yourself a caseworker, or if you have CBHI services, which stands for the Children's Behavioral Health Initiative, ask your ICC, which stands for Intensive Care Coordinator, to help, or a family partner to help you fill out these applications. Interface I've already talked about. This is a big one. gottransition.org for medical and mental health transitions. This is huge in mental health. This is huge in medical health, and this is huge in safety, and I'll tell you why. Because as soon as your child turns 18, the world changes. Everything changes, and it will come faster than you know. Everyone listening should have what's called a healthcare proxy, which is free. You don't need a lawyer. You can get one from your doctor or any hospital. And you basically say, if I am not able to speak or be awake, you're intubated, whoever it happens to be, especially right with COVID, I'm putting this person, and then if this person isn't available, then this person in charge of my medical decisions. So again, it's on the slide here. I have so much on my slides for you to take pictures of, by the way. You're always taught not to put a lot on the slide. I do it this way on purpose. You may be listening and doing laundry and cleaning your house and cooking and doing 10 other things. You may not be able to hear everything I'm saying. I'd like you to take pictures of these slides so you can move forward on these action items. Go to gottransition.org. There's stuff for kids. There's stuff for caregivers and parents. Please, 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 I encourage you to start planning it for these things at age 14, just like you would do on an IEP in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Also, prior to an emergency, have what's called a go bag. A bag with clothing, toiletries, plan, medications, care. Buy your stuff at Walmart. Nothing should go in there that if you lose it, you're going to be upset about, or your loved one will be upset about, but have it ready to go. So if you do call 911, or things happen, someone gets taken to a hospital or is unfortunately arrested or something, you've got stuff ready to go and you're not stressing out, like kind of going like this, what am I doing, while you're trying to process the emotional piece. Okay, so why the 911 disability indicator form is so important, and why we need to codify, which just means fancy term for make it law, change. Because words matter and time is precious. I also encourage you, if you do send in your 911 disability form, that you do your best to annually go and look in and update it. I'm also going to be advocating for something on the 911 screen. I'd love to see in red lettering. This isn't in the bill yet, but I'd love to see as part of the rollout of the law, something that in big red letters says something like information good as, and then gives the date, because things change positively, negatively, or stay the same, right? So we want to make sure our first responders know when this information was input, so they can use their best judgment to ask questions or to do things based on that information, and combined with the information they get on the 911 call. Cultivate a relationship. Know your police. Know your firefighters and EMTs. Again, even if it's an annual thing, when you go to when the firefighters typically have like open house, things like that, have a picture, the best ability current picture. These are all just really, they seem small, but if God forbid something happens and you call 911, or there's some other type of emergency and your loved one is missing, or whatever it happens to be, these small steps that you take could mean all of the difference in the outcomes for your loved one and for your family. If there are, again, some of this I'm sort of saying again because it's so important, if there are persisting issues, please make sure your pediatrician or your primary care, if the person is an adult, reflects the values of your family and how you live your lives, and there's cultural competence, and you're all on the same page. Please, 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 you deserve that. Again, mentioning the healthcare proxy, which is free. You can print them out usually online, get them from any hospital, any doctor. Have multiple copies, because some hospitals or places won't consider you a healthcare proxy if they don't have the actual form in front of you. Are there other legal documents that you need prior to an emergency? All of our situations are different. Just think through what you might need. Again, the Williams James College Interface Referral Service, not in all communities. Schools and Student Parent Handbook. Please, please, please. Most of us don't read it. I'm sorry, teachers and admins, but we don't. It's like 80 pages. Please, 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 if you read nothing else, go under discipline. Many times when you are signing that book, you may be saying that police can call 911, things happen. If your child's at school and not at home, you're giving them permission to talk directly with the school without your presence. Please, 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 if nothing else, look through the discipline part. Make sure whether your child's on an IEP or 504 or isn't and trying to get help, that you know what your school will do if they have to call 911. Rule out medical issues that look like mental health. This is huge. This is huge. Again, this is why you really need a good primary care or pediatrician, because sometimes if someone happens to be nonverbal, or even if they're verbal and they can't communicate pain or mental health or suffering, they may be acting out, and it may look behavioral or mental health when it's actually coming from a toothache or a migraine or reflux. So please, please, please make sure your doctors reflect your values. I know this is typically 45 minutes. I'm almost done, so I'm going to go through here. Suicide Prevention Hotline, and I've got the number in white so it pops out, 1-800-273-8255. You can call this number 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It should be in multiple languages. It's not just for suicide. If you're at your breaking point, whether it's you personally or a loved one, they are there to listen. And you can call them again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Please, please, please. I didn't realize how much they had to offer. Please know that they're there. You're never alone. Again, respite with DDS and DMH or any other program you're involved in. If nothing else, do they have money? A lot of these programs didn't have money before. They may have COVID funds right now. Take advantage of that, please. In the IEP or the ISP for an adult, please, 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 and you can have goals for safety, consent, not just around sexuality, but consent. Financially, consent is really an important thing that most of us overlook that can lead to dangerous situations. Self-advocacy, crisis planning, and evacuation plans. Your loved one may or may not be evacuated with their peers at a school, or you don't know how things are going to go down in a group home. Please make it your goal to know and to have everything in writing, because if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. Again, if you don't have natural supports, please, please, please advocate for community supports, other families in your situation, and find your family. If it's not working, it's not the right plan, no matter who wrote it. Some people are like, I have 5 PhDs and this famous person and this famous person and blah, 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 and it's not working. What's wrong with my kid? It's not your kid. The plan isn't working. Your child has to, or young adult or elderly person, whomever, has to know and understand the plan. Verbal, nonverbal, complex medical, all of the above. If it can't be carried out in a drill, it's never going to happen. They need to know what's going on. They need to have a voice. Yes, thank you so much, Yahara, right? We all assume our kids are leaving with their peers. They are not. This is another area I really advocate for in the work that I do. So I encourage people to make sure, because there's nothing on an IEP that talks about safety, and there's nothing on an IEP that talks about, are there barriers in an evacuation plan? No. And by the way, if your child has autism, there's a fantastic technical bulletin that I didn't share here, but I can share, that lists all of the things that the IEP team is supposed to be asking. Does it impact X or Y or Z? But no matter what your child's disability is, and I'm not just talking about mobility issues, this is not just for kids in wheelchairs. This is for invisible disabilities, mobility disabilities, all of it. Please, 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 I encourage you to get it in the IEP and the ISP. If your adult child is in a group home, ask to see the plans, be part of it. So again, if a plan isn't working, it's not your kid. You need to go back to square one, throw the plan in the trash. You've got to start with a plan that works. Discharge meetings, please, please, please. If your loved one is discharged, be it mental health, even the juvenile or adult prison system, whatever it happens to be, there's so little done there. Please, please, please bring in as many stakeholders as you can and come up with a plan. If there's no plan, you're flying by the seat of your pants, as they say. Share your story with your legislators. They're people just like me and you, whether or not even they look like us. They are here to work for us. We are their bosses. It doesn't matter if they have PhDs. It doesn't matter if they have law degrees. It doesn't matter if they went to Yale. These individuals are in elected positions and they work for you. Take that in, feel it, and run if you can. But beyond that, please, I have shared here on the slide how to look up your legislator. Your legislators. All you have to do is put in your address. Boop, they pop up. And then you can go to their pages. They have their emails. Some are not meeting in person right now because of COVID. But by the way, email has been, the Secretary of State says that email is a form of public information. So if you send an email, I'm not saying people will, don't put too much in it. Ask to speak to them on the phone. Have a conversation, share with them, develop a relationship, share your story. It's powerful. If everything's broken and nothing is working, our legislators have got to hear about it. And they do, but we need to continue to push that. So action items, almost done, action items. So and I've got this website here again, find your legislator and ask them to support House Bill 4080 and co-sponsor this critical piece of legislation. Do we need to train our police and first responders? Yes. Do we need to address systemic racism and individual racism and bias? Yes. But there's a lot more we also have to do to get the whole picture. And we need to make sure that these individuals, trained or not, in the 351 cities and towns, have at least minimal information so that they walk out of this alive and the first responder walks out alive. And they both walk out, hopefully, with minimal to no trauma and no unnecessary arrest and get the help that they need. If you want to fill out the 911 disability indicator form, because now you can use your cell phone, perfect. You'll see that the form is an imperfect form. I'll leave it at that. But this is where you can find that form. Again, I also put all this information about the form itself and how to, I think I actually went over one of the most important parts. You can email in support of this bill. That was also in both my slides and as well on the discussion. So you can email your legislator. You can call your legislator. You can testify virtually for the State House on the 26th of January, or you can send in email testimony. So it's a lot of ways you can contribute in just minutes and change people's lives and outcomes. If you testify, I believe you get a 3-minute limit. And so what I suggest is on your phone. Those of us who go to school committee, city council, selectmen, things like that, we already might know this, but just set the watch and just speak at your typical pace so that you have enough time to do your dramatic pauses or whatever it is you need to do and not be cut off. And lastly, please never wait until crisis to act. I understand crisis can happen without our knowledge, but do your best you can to plan and learn from your mistakes and pivot no matter what happened. Don't be down on yourself, okay? Any mistake is a point of learning. And remember, any movement forward, no matter how slow, is progress. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for attending this important presentation. Thank you to Yahara Lopez and Autism Sprinter, who do phenomenal work for all families, but really ensuring that Black and Brown communities can access what they need to access. We need parity, we need equitable access, and we all need to be part of this process. Okay. Thank you for your advocacy in advance, and be kind to one another.
I love this. This was awesome.
Thank you.
And you know what's interesting, right, Carrie? Because I think that for most of us parents, right, we don't know how to access emergency services for our children. We don't know who to call.
Nope.
I don't think that this is something that is a table talk conversation. I don't think that we sit at dinner to determine when we're going to call 911, right? For our
Nope.
children, right? So I love this conversation because I also, you know, as someone who's worked in crisis, I can honestly tell you that there is a huge deficit in how we support those with disabilities, because as you know, that many crisis teams and those that are in a space of mental health, they don't have specialized facilities for those that have dual diagnosis, whether it's, you know, autism and mental health, ADHD and mental health. There isn't dual diagnosis facilities that can help support our loved ones that have a disability. And then also kind of understanding, is it more of the disability than it is the emergency, and understanding that. And I can honestly tell you, as someone that's worked in crisis, it was really, really hard assessing situations, because you have to determine whether this is the disability or this is a situation that requires a higher level of care or a higher level of support. And there's no manual.
There's no manual. And the huge part of this that I want to say, because like you said, there's like not enough time to go into all this, but I have seen personally and professionally individuals trying to access mental health in a hospital come out with charges.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying it's okay. You know, we can't say, well, you know, we can hit nurses and doctors. So please, that is not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is we can do better. We can train security who's at the front of the hospital, who really, they're the gatekeepers, right? Unless someone's coming in via ambulance. We need disability training, to your point, not just mental health training. And, you know, working in crisis, and I found out later, a lot of crisis people don't have trauma training. Let me say this again. A lot of crisis people don't have trauma training. So for those of you new to this, mental health doesn't equal trauma. All mass dispatchers will see the disability indicator if we call from our cell phone. You know what, Patty? I'm not entirely sure, and I'm going to write that down and find that out for you, because so in the past, I believe it's only your city or town, because in the past, only people with landlines could use the disability indicator form. So say if you lived in Quincy and you have a landline and you use this, it's only going to Quincy anyway. And this is a bit of a bone of contention, Patty, because there's good and bad. Some of us want it to go to all of the first responders, but this is why we need to codify it, right? So we can all come in and say, well, I want it to go to all of the 351 cities and towns. There are some people, I'll forewarn you in advance, that say, well, then you're making a registry, and registries are bad for all the reasons we know. So this is part of why we need to pass this law, Patty, and have these really important discussions and say, well, I don't think, sure, to my city or town, fantastic, but what if I have my son 3 towns over?
Right.
And my son, how many of us have been in the car with our loved ones wondering if we had to call 911?
Yep.
Or pulling over to the side of the road and hoping if a statey pulled over that they were trained in disability and or mental health and didn't arrest our loved one, and that we all came out alive. This is why it's so important. This is why we need to codify this law and have families like ours, or people with lived experience who are professionals, make sure that we capture all these pieces, right?
And that's so true because I think about it. Like I sat in the back and I'm listening and I'm like, man, I never even thought about the IEP. So now I'm sitting here, I'm taking all these notes, right? And I'm like, I have some questions that I need to ask. And then
Yes.
it's interesting because as parents, especially for those of us who are really actively involved when we ask questions, don't realize that information like this makes you actually think more about more questions to ask. And I never honestly ask or care to ask honestly about what does the evacuation plan look like for children that are not in mainstream or inclusion classroom, for children who are in
Or,
autism strand programs, who are nonverbal, who are disabled, on wheelchairs, and I've never, I
and
don't know what that looks like.
I'll tell you, even kids in inclusion classrooms, but in addition to that, I'll tell you, it's probably going to be different in every district and possibly different in all of your communities. So, just so all of you know, it's not your superintendent may put out plans, but it's actually the principal of every school who is responsible for the actions that occur within the building and outside the building. So, that principal of your particular school is the expert. Or if you have a young adult in a group home, don't please don't assume your group home even has evacuation procedures that are tailored to your loved one's disabilities. Please don't assume. Please ask the question.
Wow, this is this is I'm
Yeah.
sitting here like I have more questions. So Carrie, thank you so much.
Thank you
I
for having me.
really appreciate you. And if you have a copy or something that you want us to share on Autism Sprinter, a letter that you already have drafted where those who are watching this live can copy and paste and make
Sure.
edits and send to their legislators, share that with us and we'll gladly push it out and making sure that we address this, because I always think about the fact that most of us can go to our local police department and inform them that there's a child in the community who has a disability and do that whole registration process. But to be honest with you, I don't know what happens after that, right?
Right?
Like it feels like normal because most people tell you don't forget to go to your local police department, make sure that you update the yearly
Right.
picture, but you don't know what happens after that. And honestly, like this just taught me that I need to ask those questions about what happens after you go to your local police department to do the process of ensuring that their database shows that there is a child in the community, your child that has autism or any other disability, that they may wander off from the home or bolters or runners.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it look like when, if you have to call 911 and you wake up because, some of our children can get crafty. They may know how to
Oh, yeah.
unlock and
They're
leave
smart.
through windows, sliding doors,
They're
and
a
know
step
how to.
ahead of us. Yeah.
Right. And FYI, guys, let me tell you guys something. They're very observant, and those
Oh,
amazing locks that everyone talks about, and you can get
mhm.
the top notch to the top notch of those safety guards. They pay attention.
They do. They do. They're one step ahead at all times. And we all know, like, they're laser focused, right? And so when they want to do something, yeah.
Yeah, and I, this is great. So where can we find you? Where can we find you on Facebook and email? Where can
Absolutely.
we find you?
Absolutely. So instead of giving out my email, which is a bit long, I'm going to say for families, for caregivers, for professionals, educators, legislators, everybody, honestly, just go to my page on Facebook. You can message me at A Safer Me, and I can take your email, and we can then communicate via email, communicate via phone, things like that. You can go to my website, www.asaferme.com, and just sort of see a little bit more about what I do, my trainings, how I can be helpful to your school, to yourself, to your community. But like I said, I think reaching out via Facebook will be quick and we can exchange, because I always like to meet the individual where they're at. How do they prefer to communicate? And that's how I'll communicate.
And you can count us in over here at Autism Sprinter to help support, sponsor, whatever it is that we do, because we want to get into the space of helping push legislation as well over here, because we know that equity is not real in the disability space, especially for our very marginalized group. And so we're here and we want to support this bill with you. So add us to the list and we will email. We will ensure that our families and our participants who are interested, definitely send their emails. So again, girl, thank you.
Yes, thank you for helping. Thank you for your energy, and thank you for so much for all that you do in the community and the help and the change that you're making in people's lives and the systems. We need you.
Aww, thank you. All right, guys. See ya later. Catch the replay. Share. Don't forget to hit up Carrie. And we will be uploading this on YouTube for the future. So it should be on YouTube by this evening. But again, guys, thank you. And we look forward to having our next guest, y'all, because Stephanie of VinFin is going to be coming in next to tell us about the DSE program and Autism Support Center here at VinFin. And we're really excited about that because this mama plays no games. And so we are excited to have her here as well. But again, guys, have a good day. Stay warm if you're in Massachusetts and catch the replay and share. Bye.
Bye.
Autism Sprinter. Think equity. It's time to give the power back to the people. We're fighting to make our beliefs equal. Look at the failed policies and how they treat you. We got strength, we're far from feeble. This is for anyone with autism or a disability. Time to unite, show them how strong our will can be. Move readily, we're promoting equity. A non-profit platform, that's the recipe. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with Autism Sprinter. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with Autism Sprinter. It's time to make a change. It's time to stand up for what we believe in. Equality and equity across the board. No matter your race, nation, or creed, disability, or your needs. It gotta be equal. It gotta be right.